Today's episode is sponsored by Ellie, Ellii.
Ellie is one of the world's leading content libraries for English language teachers, with thousands of ready-made lessons and flashcards and hundreds of videos that you can use to complement your own curriculum or use as your main source of materials.
Ellie is run by a team of former English teachers, dedicated to creating content that engages your language learners.
If you're an independent teacher or paying for your materials out of pocket, we invite you to use our podcast's exclusive discount code Think-Aloud to save 15% off your first membership term. That's THINKALOUD.
And if you're an administrator looking to buy for your whole program, just reach out to the fine folks at Ellie to inquire about a 2-month free trial to test it out for your organization. And don't forget to mention who sent you, your friends at the Teacher Think Aloud podcast.
Head to ellie.com today. That's ELLII.com.
Hello, and welcome to the Teacher Think Aloud podcast, a podcast for reflective practice for teachers of English around the world. I'm your co-host, Shé.
And I'm Anna. Summer's here, depending on your hemisphere, I guess.
Woo.
And we wanted to put together a reading list that can accompany your travels, your downtime, or even just those in-between moments.
Yes, but this isn't just any reading list. It's curated with global educators in mind, especially those of us in ELT who are constantly helping our learners navigate not just language, but culture, identity, and belonging. These books are windows into lives that are at once unfamiliar and deeply resonant, especially if you've ever taught across cultures or across borders.
We should preface this episode with a warning.
Yes.
We're not very good at picking light, fun summer reads.
No, that's very true. If you are looking for maybe a lighthearted beach read, you are absolutely in the wrong place. We don't do that. Most of these books have the power to move you to tears. Disclaimer.
At the very least, they'll make you question what you previously thought to be true.
Mm-hmm. Despite the heavy themes, we had a lot of fun putting this list together. Some of the books we picked, each of us on our own, and a few we both loved. We had them in common. So in this episode, we'll go back and forth a bit. We'll chat about what drew us to these works and share some ideas about how you might implement these pieces and their respective themes in your classroom. Ready?
I'm ready. Let me kick things off with The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese. I don't actually know how that's pronounced.
Should have looked that up.
Yeah, The Covenant of Water. This novel was such a sensory experience. The way it maps Kerala, India's landscapes, its religious diversity, caste hierarchies. It's like reading a family archive.
That one's on my to-read list. And actually, it's on my bookshelf. I bought it months ago. But it's bulk. It's a whopping 736 pages. It's
I almost
pretty
died.
intimidating. Yeah. But I have heard people say that it feels like a love letter to a place. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And I will say, it's big. It does drag on a bit with a bit of a lull in the middle. But the characters are just so lovable. And I felt so invested by the end. And what I love most about this book is really watching the evolution of a family and a place over time, and especially learning more about Kerala, a southern Indian state I visited several years ago now.
I always enjoy an epic. There's something about watching characters navigate generational expectations and changes. It reminds me of how our students bring inherited stories to class, consciously or not. So, what did you find out?
Well, some of the things that I found interesting about the book, I knew that there was a big Christian community in Kerala, but it was really interesting in this book to learn about how the St. Thomas Christians are their own offshoot of Christianity. So when missionaries from the West arrived trying to convert the locals were just like, hey, we've got our own brand of Christianity, thank you very much. So this is a minority group we don't really think of much when we think of India.
I mean, it's certainly the first time I'm hearing about this group. Cool.
Yeah. And the book also explores Anglo-Indian identity, one that I really hadn't pondered much before. English people, or I guess British people more broadly, who came over during colonial rule, but integrated deeply in the culture of India and with the people.
It sounds really interesting. I might have to make this one my next fiction read. We'll see.
You
I've
should.
got a pretty serious stack. But while we're talking about generational shifts, I'll bring in Solito by Javier Zamora here. We both read it, and I will say it absolutely gutted me.
Ugh, same.
Yeah. His voice, an unaccompanied 9-year-old trying to survive this impossible journey from El Salvador to the United States to reunite with his parents. It's so clear. It's so vulnerable.
And the fact that it's a memoir makes it even more powerful to me.
Absolutely. I've worked with several students from Central America over the years who have survived similarly harrowing journeys. I don't think that most people understand what it means to voluntarily relocate like so many do, who much of the time fleeing political unrest, gang violence, war. As Somali British poet Varsan Shire reminds us in her poem, Home, no one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark.
Such powerful words, such a powerful poem.
And we've linked it in the show notes, listeners, along with all of the books we're talking about here today.
Shire's poem and Zamora's memoir seem like especially important works to bring up now. Also, such a contentious moment for the immigrant community in the U.S. and around the world, with the ICE raids happening all over the country. I mean, travel bans, deportations of not only undocumented individuals, but legalized citizens or green card holders through racial profiling. I mean, and also, holds on visa interviews. There's just so much going on.
There's so much suck. Yes, absolutely agree. Yeah. Well, so I think that this is an important moment for educators, and I think that it's important work for educators who are working with minoritized groups, both domestically and abroad, where maybe our students might be concerned for themselves and their family members. I think that's worth considering.
And speaking of family, I also appreciate how Zamora focused on the family, quote unquote family, that came about among the group of Salvadorans who were traveling together. I mean, they weren't blood relatives, but they kind of became family. The trauma really brought them closer.
I know I'm constantly recommending books to people and trying to get people to read books that cultivate empathy. It's like one of my low-key missions in life.
Ding.
But more generally, just awareness around other lived experiences. And this is one that I've recommended to others because I think it's really effective in challenging the way that people think about the immigrant experience. It shows just how layered, traumatic, and ongoing it can be.
Totally. And that makes a great transition to Beautiful Country by Qian Julie Wang. Her memoir is also about being undocumented in the U.S. as a child, but from a Chinese perspective. And this one doesn't really follow her journey to the States, but it follows the author's experience immigrating to New York City, what it was like once she was there to try to fit in, living in poverty, working in a sweatshop. It's just heartbreaking. It shows another facet of what it means to grow up unseen and unheard.
We see so many of our learners trying to survive while striving. And this book reminds us that resilience is often invisible. And it's important, I think, to showcase to our learners who may or may not feel comfortable talking about their vulnerability that despite hardship, humans can prevail.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that this is a good place for us to talk about another one of our shared reads, Anna. The Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane by Lisa C.
Oh, so good. Yes. I
love her.
This one.
Yeah.
This one also brought up another culture that I didn't know anything about before, that of the Aka culture in China.
This one might be one of my favorite reads of the year, actually. And Lisa C. definitely catapulted her way to one of my top 10 author spots because of this novel.
Same.
Oh, I love that. And we sort of discovered her, both of us discovered her last year, I think, right? With the
in the last year or two. I mean, she's just incredible. I've read other stuff by her too since then. But yeah. What were your thoughts on this?
Well, within this particular book, it was really this opportunity to immerse yourself in this tapestry of Chinese culture that isn't talked about all that much. And as you mentioned, the Aka community. And so it talks about the traditions of this ethnic minority and the complex world of tea. And I loved that it's just so different from, the lives that you and I lead, right? But once you spend time with the characters, you start to really understand their motivations and the historical backdrop. So I thought it was fascinating. I loved it.
Yeah. And another layer to this already very deep novel is that you're exposed to the one-child policy, which I thought was really interesting. I didn't know the extent of the practices during this era of Chinese history in the 90s.
Yeah.
I've had a few Chinese students over the years who've shared insight with me, so I appreciate being able to fill in some of my knowledge gaps there.
Yeah. I love how much learning can happen through fiction. I think you know this. I've always felt a little bit sheepish about the pleasure that I derive from reading fiction. Like it doesn't count somehow. It's not
it
true
totally
reading.
counts. I mean, I would argue that the best kind of reading is the reading that actually happens, right?
Yeah,
and you
right.
get so much out of fiction.
Yes, spoken like a true teacher there, right? Well, so, with my travels to China last year, I sought out a lot of Chinese literature. I read several titles from China that stayed with me and discovered another new author to follow, An Yu. And her two books that I read were Ghost Music and Braised Pork. And essentially, they both explore silence, surrealism, and identity in post-reform China. Really fascinating stuff.
I remember you mentioning braised pork when you finished it. So what is it that stood out to you?
Well, it was delicious, first of all. Okay. No, really. It felt like a dream and a meditation at the same time. Yeah, so maybe these are the two least depressing books that we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
So it starts with the sudden death of the protagonist Jiajia's husband. Yes.
Least depressing.
Least depressing, right? Freedom. No, I'm just kidding. And so ultimately it becomes this sort of surreal journey of self-discovery. And it's set in contemporary Beijing, and the novel contrasts China's modern exterior with an interior world of spiritual searching. So it's a subtle critique of modern disconnection and a not so subtle critique of patriarchal oppression and emotional repression. So
this book is very you. It sounds so powerful.
it was. And then the other one, Ghost Music by An Yu. I couldn't choose. They're different and they have different messages. Read both. But essentially, it follows a young pianist in Beijing whose life starts to unravel as she receives these mysterious packages of mushrooms in the mail. It sounds ridiculous. You can tell we've never talked about this book before by your reaction right now. It's also set in modern China, and it brings together memory, music, and myth, and also the question of obedience and the stories that are left unspoken between generations. So again, it's just this haunting examination of identity, spiritual fulfillment, and it's hard to not feel for the protagonists, though they are, flawed beings. And An Yu's prose is minimalist, but very emotionally loaded, so very recommended. Yeah.
It sounds like there's a lot you can take away from these novels.
Yeah.
But you cheated. Come on, that's 2 novels.
Who doesn't like a 2-for-1 deal?
All right. Well, want to do a quick nonfiction round while we're here?
Yes. Tell us about Airplane Mode by Shahnaz Habib. You've mentioned this book in a few recent conversations with guests. What's the hubbub, Anna?
Yeah, okay. So I can't stop talking about this book. So it's travel writing, but with an edge. So Shahnaz Habib, she examines what it means to move through the world as a brown Muslim woman. She weaves together both personal narrative and shrewd research about the history of travel. It's funny, it's sharp, it's full of reflection, and one detail is travel guides have led to a very specific Western type of travel where places are considered things to check off a list and discover, quote unquote, right? Discover being a very colonial term.
Yes.
She talks about passportism, the privilege of certain passports and not needing visas, and I mean, just so much more. It's just enlightening.
It's an interesting juxtaposition, isn't it? Other stories on this list highlight individuals who can't travel freely, who are forced to relocate when it's the last thing that they want to do. This sounds like a great place for a reality check.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth the read and the reflection. Do you have any nonfiction reads to recommend, Shay?
Oh, I've been stuck in like a romantasy cycle for a while, so no, but I do have an anthology for you. Yes, the Penguin Book of Migration Literature, which is divided into 4 sections: departures, arrivals, generations, and returns. And it's a collection of, it's amazing. It's a collection of excerpts from authors all over the world, including memoirs and nonfiction, poetry, and fictional pieces. What I love most about this anthology, though, is really in the organization. You have at the start the contents section, which tells you explicitly the migration pattern highlighted in each excerpt. It's like Poland to Canada. So I think it serves as a quick reference for teachers. You can think through who's in my class and what would work for them. How could they identify, right? And then there's also a suggestions for further reading and viewing section at the end, which I always just really appreciate.
Yeah, it sounds like a treasure trove. Incredibly useful. I know I always get so much by looking at bibliographies and research. Sounds kind of along the same lines.
Yeah, exactly. So it reminded me of the same thing. I think it can be overwhelming to sift through all that's out there. So I always appreciate having a little support along the way. All right, we must be coming to the end of our list. What else have you got?
Are we? Okay.
We're almost there. I'm so sweaty just getting excited about literature. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. This is one of our favorite things. So I think the next one for me is Kaikeyi by Vaishnavi Patel. And this surprised me. It reimagines a character from the Ramayana. And I am completely butchering that word because my husband's currently reading this book per my suggestion, and he keeps correcting me on the pronunciation of the Ramayana. I think that's correct.
I love that you got him to read it. That's a
I know.
surprise to me.
You know what? And it's sad because he's actually not as big of a fan of it as I was, but maybe because he read the Ramayana. But this book actually, it breaks down the trope from that story, you know, the story of Rama, and completely flips it on its head. It just reveals the ugly side of Rama, or Ram, I guess is the name of the god, because the A isn't always pronounced at the end there. A lot of his acts of rage are portrayed as heroic in the Ramayana. But if you look at them from another perspective, they can be seen as cruel, childish, and overzealous.
It sounds like an interesting read. I love that you're experiencing it differently as your husband's reading it. That's interesting. Do you think it has any relevance to our work in ELT?
Well, absolutely. I mean, this one I think is a really good starting place to discuss gender roles in the classroom. And I could see assigning something to students where they reimagine a popular character from their own culture and flip the perspective.
It sounds like a great opportunity to work with perspective taking and maybe a fun and creative way to engage with language.
Yeah, I like that it challenges dominant narratives, just like we ask our students to do when reading critically or writing their own stories.
Yeah. And in that same vein, I want to add 10 minutes, 38 seconds in This Strange World by Elif Shafak here. Have you heard of it?
I've read other novels by Elif Shafak, but not this one.
Well, this one is, I will say it's not for young audiences. If you're a teacher working with younger learners, this is definitely not one that you're going to want to integrate. It's for mature audiences only. It's this really beautifully brutal novel set in Istanbul. Layla, who is a sex worker, relives her life through memory just moments after her death. There are no spoilers there. It says it on the back cover, so it's quite intense. It's very sad, but it's a very powerful story about chosen family, cultural erasure, and resistance. And I love the way Shafak made Istanbul a character itself, conflicted, layered, mournful. I think teachers reading this might reflect on the power of place in shaping voice and belonging.
That sounds amazing. I need to get my hands on that one.
When you come over here in August, I'm going to give you a whole stack of books to take home. I couldn't put it down. It's one of those books where you want to slow down and savor, but it's just too compelling.
Yeah, I feel that way about a lot of books, and also about Homegoing by Yag Yazi.
Oh, that book's a masterpiece.
Yeah, it really is. It follows 2 half-sisters across centuries and continents, and made me think a lot about legacy and, you know, part of that, how trauma and strength are both inherited. It gives a nuanced view of Ghanaian and African American histories. There's a lot of storytelling in our classrooms that tries to simplify identity, but it's so complex.
Absolutely. And I think books like Homegoing undo that in the best ways. If I recall correctly, I think I read that like 3 or 4 years ago. There are a lot of moving pieces and like a web of character connections in the novel, which for some readers, including myself, can feel overwhelming. I almost feel like I need to take notes to remember who belongs to what area. But I think it's definitely worth working through.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely worth it.
I can also recommend A Woman is No Man by Etaf Room, which also speaks to the transnational experience. It's set in Brooklyn and Palestine, and it's about silence, shame, and the power of literacy for Palestinian American women. It's heartbreaking, but full of hope. And it's so relevant for us, I think, because in the ELT classroom, books aren't just texts, right? They're mirrors, they're windows, and sometimes lifelines, like we see in that novel.
Well said. Okay. I think you can squeeze in one more.
Okay. One more.
Go.
I want to recommend Everything Inside by Haitian writer Edwidge Danticat. This is a collection of short stories set in Haiti, Miami, and other unnamed countries in the Caribbean and beyond.
I've heard of her. What do you like about this collection of stories?
Well, a lot of the books we've shared might take a bit of tinkering before bringing them into the classroom, as excerpts or otherwise. But short stories, to me, feel more accessible, and it might feel more accessible for teachers. And because Danticat has created these robust narratives with diverse protagonists living very different lives, I think a teacher could very easily find themes that their students could easily identify with.
Yeah. I could even see offering a menu of short stories for students to choose from. Maybe asking students to share a summary of their selected story, why they chose it, how they identified with it, what they're curious to learn more about, and so on.
Absolutely. Fertile ground for reflection and discussion.
Okay. Phew. We did it. Yeah. That's our 2025 summer reading list. Definitely not light, as we told you. 13 books that speak across borders and into classrooms. And honestly, we know there are so many more out there that could work on this list.
We had a hard time cutting this list down. Hence the awkward number of books, 13. We were really going for 10. I think we started with 20, so that's worth mentioning. So this list isn't definitive, but rather an invitation. If you've got a title that has made you think differently about a place, a culture, or even your own identity as an educator, share it with us. We love building community around books. Anna, maybe we should start a Teacher Think-Aloud podcast book club. I know you're already part of like 7 book clubs. So.
Oh, yeah. More like 2 now.
Okay, 2. Okay, well, listeners, should we start a book club for cross-cultural understanding? Send us a message and let us know.
Okay. And if you're thinking of using any of the titles we've mentioned today in your classroom or in your professional development groups, we'd love to hear how. Some of these could work as book club selections for teachers or even advanced learners, especially ones like Airplane Mode or a selection from the Penguin Book of Migration Literature that open up conversations about race, migration, and representation.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to bring literary text into language classrooms. Excerpts can serve as springboards for deeper cultural inquiry, vocabulary development, writing prompts. For example, you could use Solito or Beautiful Country for narrative writing and personal storytelling. You could explore family structures and traditions through Homegoing or the Covenant of Water and connect them to students' own cultural heritage. Or you could use braised pork and kaikeyi to examine cultural symbolism and gender roles. Just a few things.
Yeah, just go wild. And even when you're not teaching full text, these books can serve as the foundation for thematic units. Think migration and memory, food and culture, silence and resistance, or how women reclaim agency across different societies.
So here are a few reflective questions to take with you as you read this summer or to share with your learners, your team, your teacher book club. Which cultural assumptions did this book challenge for you? How does the author use language to convey a sense of place or history? In what ways do the characters reflect or resist societal expectations? What insights does this book offer about resilience, power, or belonging? And how might your students connect, or struggle to connect, with this text? And how would you scaffold that?
Oh, and one more. One we keep asking ourselves, how do these stories make us better teachers?
Yes. So, wherever you are right now, in a hammock, on a long train ride, or just taking a few minutes between lesson prep for the upcoming school year, we hope these stories find you well.
And we hope they leave you changed just a little, because the best stories do.
If you found this episode helpful or inspiring, please share it with a friend or colleague, or leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you're feeling generous, you can even support the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thinkaloudpod.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Teacher Think Aloud podcast. Until next time, friends, happy teaching.
And happy reflecting.